little prelude that you were talking about memory. Um, Very often, when we're learning Daolu, which we do in these arts, the Neja Chuan, our form, our pumste, our choreography, our set, our sequence, our short form, long form, 48 form, whatever it is. Um, Students end up, by and large, uh, really getting hung up on, can I remember the choreography? Particularly when you have a 108 move form, or you have a 108 move form and a 48 form and a simplified 36 and the 42 sword, or plus that two-man set that has 9 moves or whatever. It's like, oh, I can't. And then of course, so people will generally get fairly hung up on it, like that's what's important, and it isn't really that important. What's important is the alphabet and grammar, not that you memorize a poem. It's pretty cool to memorize a poem. And if you happen to be teaching the poem, it's really helpful to have it memorized. Like for me, you say, on that move, and I can like pretty quickly go, oh yeah, yes, I know. Let's face this way. Here's where the feet are. No, the hand starts here. It's less uh, inefficient in a class, but it's not even necessary. If I just didn't know which one, just take me a minute. Let's look it up. Oh, right, that now I know what you mean. So we took a few minutes to figure it out. Um, but it wasn't ever my intention as a teacher. Like, let me make sure I master in terms of memory the sequence. It's just learn the grammar, learn the alphabet, and then practice play at putting them together certain ways. And we do that with our language. We have a very limited vocabulary that's right on our front burner. We never use the word incorrectly, you know, uh, and we have a wider vocabulary where sometimes we use it correctly, sometimes it's not quite correct, but you still got my meaning, or I didn't quite pronounce it right, or if you called me on the carpet and got me to try and tell you what the word is, right? Yeah, it functioned in my language, and you nodded, and we got through it, but I still couldn't really teach that word. And then we have other words where I used to know it, it looks familiar. Maybe it's just that it's similar to this other word. And then a larger field, I just don't know that. I mean, I don't, some of that's technical terms, like a bunch of engineering words. There's no reason I would know. A bunch of plant botanist words. There's no reason, even though it's an English word, I don't know that use of the word, right? So what's important in learning the form is that you're practicing reciting a poem, right, with your body and your breath and your mind, right, your consciousness. Um, you're practicing reciting that poem. And sometimes the teacher says, let's pick it up on the fourth stanza and work on that part, or let's pick it up from Juliet's line on page 7. Good. Well, that's reasonable. But the point isn't to memorize it. The point is to use that practice of the recitation to grasp the grammar and the meaning of the words, right? So what we might call the jing in Tai Chi Chuan, right? That's what this expression is. That's what this pong means and what it feels like, what it's used for, maybe where it comes from, or what what challenges it, or how it feels in the body, or whatever, right? Now, it stands to reason if you repeat that same class in summer school, the poetry class, you'll probably kind of end up memorizing what is covered in the class in the curriculum. Maybe just parts at a time, maybe link it together. Maybe if we put the spotlight on you and say you're cast in the role of Juliet, maybe it's a little harder to access what you memorize because you're on stage and this is your parents are in the audience, go. That's a little more stress. That's not a good test of whether or not you have it memorized, right? It's a challenge to what's memorized. And we've all seen that in class. Hey, can you just show us? No, we're all going to watch. We're like, oh, this is easier at home. It's easier when you don't watch. Of course, right? But we're not trying to see, can you memorize it? We're trying to look through the vessel of what's been memorized, however rickety, at the grammar and the grasp of the words or the alphabet, maybe the words, alphabet, whatever. Are we getting breaking it down to molecule or atom? Doesn't really matter to me here. So obviously, when things are memorized, everything's a lot easier. If the person is off script and they're asked to go up there and read, they can really focus on connecting to their other acting partner and really deliver the lines better because it's not the challenge. And similarly, working on your form, when it's memorized, a lot of things come easier. But I don't think the goal should be to memorize. The goal should be to do the practice of memorization or recitation or iteration with the idea of grasping the concepts, whether those are Chinese terms like we were saying zhongding or pong or pengjin or something, or they're just ideas of strength, stability, structure, balance, breath, attention, intention, these sort of things. Like those can be the molecules or the atoms of the practice. So while it's helpful to memorize and it's maybe inspiring to see what somebody has memorized, doesn't really become the like it doesn't really matter if you're going through it and you go, oh, let me just go over, oh yeah, there's my, oh, I see, okay, let me go back to that. It's probably a lot more fun if you don't have to do that because you can just keep going. So you'll probably enjoy it more if you don't have to keep stopping and looking in a notebook or checking in your brain for, oh wait, am I lost? Obviously a little bit more fun, but I don't think that that should be the goal. I think it's very likely to just become what happens because you're practicing. And if we remember that the intention is not to memorize, then we can start to see that our focus is really on the practice itself, the breath, the body, the movement, the shifting, the expression, the folding, the unfolding, whatever the shapes of the hands, the integration of the body. And then notice that without even trying, you've memorized whatever it is you've memorized. And as we started by saying, outside the realm of what you memorized, there's always an awful lot more that you haven't memorized, or stuff that seems familiar, but you can't say you've memorized it, or you're pretty sure about, but as soon as you're on stage, it kind of falls apart a little. So there's like these realms or fields or I think of it as like an uncollapsed statistical field of probability, and there's like sort of degrees of that or amplitudes of that in which I've never heard of it. I think it sort of seems familiar. Sometimes I use it, but I'm not even sure if I use it right all the time, and I certainly couldn't teach it. Rarely used words, but I'm still pretty good with them, pretty certain. And then my 600 word vocabulary that I'm pretty dead certain on, I could score 100 on a test. I could teach all those without a dictionary. So having said all that, that can hopefully shift you from any anxiety that stems from valuing the or improperly valuing the state of having memorized, right? If you happen to memorize something, and you will, you kind of can't help it, just say, hey, this is what I memorized. There's plenty else I haven't, notably the stuff at the end of what you're working on and of course, but I still memorize plenty and I can enjoy the benefits of that, but I'm not going to take the enjoyment and outweigh it by the fretting because I've improperly assigned value to the memorization. Because then you're doing your Tai Chi, but you're developing anxiety, you're developing stress, you're developing frustration, which aren't really the reason somebody does Tai Chi Chuan. Yeah.